Hey everyone, and welcome to our April live event with Nicki LaFoille. Once again, she's back to answer all of your sewing questions. Thanks so much for being here, Nicki.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, so we're going to get right to it with a question here from Karma. And she says that pattern companies often have far more ease than is needed in sleeve patterns. How much is really needed, and how can we take out the extra before cutting out the garments?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Pattern companies do put in a lot of extra ease that is not necessary a lot of times. The question of how much ease is truly necessary all depends on a bunch of different factors. So mainly the type of fabric you're using. If you're sewing a sleeve with a knit, it can require anywhere from 0 inches of ease to 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, depending on the amount of stretch in your knit and the look that you're going for. For most typical set-in sleeve patterns, the manufacturer will include up to 1.5 inches of ease, which is a huge amount. And that's only really necessary if you're doing like a tailored jacket or a blazer out of wool, something that really needs that ease and that space for your shoulder joint. For your typical cotton blouse, again, it all depends on the type of fit that you're looking for, but I would say you can even, well, you'll want to, make a test fitting sample of the pattern using a fabric similar to the intended project fabric. But I would say you could probably go ahead and take out like 1/2 inch of ease to even start with, and having that 1 inch of ease for your set-in sleeve provides a pretty good place to start in most cases. But again, test everything, and it all depends on the fit that you're looking for. But to take out the ease from a sleeve pattern, so here's my 1/4 scale sleeve pattern demo. You want to get a separate piece of paper to trace your new sleeve pattern onto, and draw your center line on your separate sheet of paper. So that'll be your sleeves grain line. And you can determine how much ease you want to take out of your pattern, and split that in half and draw a line parallel to your center line on either side of the patterns, or on either side of the center line. So if you want to take out a 1/2 inch, draw a line 1/4 inch on either side of that center line. And take your pattern, and we're going to cut along the center line down to the bicep line. And if the bicep line is not marked on your pattern, it is either right at this, that point, or about a 1/2 inch below it. So it's right in that area. So we're going to cut down the center line to the bicep line, and then cut toward the edges. And we're going to leave a little hinge at the edge. So that'll be our hinge point. There we go. And you're going to align your center lines on your paper, and just rotate. Once that is taped down, you're going to rotate each part of the sleeve cap in to meet the opposite line that you drew. So that's going to take out a 1/4 inch of ease from this side and a 1/4 inch of ease from this side as you rotate that down to meet, so that this point is going to meet the opposite line on the opposite side of the center line. And you're going to have to true the sleeve cap because you're going to get a little chunky line there. But just kind of smooth that out with either just kind of sketch it in, or using a French curve ruler. It's a really good curved edge to use to true that up. And that's going to take out ease out of that sleeve cap. So there's your alteration. Depending on how much you want to take out, that'll work, or however much you need to take out.
Perfect. So just because I know from my personal garment making experience, I never make a muslin fitting sample like I probably should. So if I've already made it and put it on and just realized that it's too big, is there a way to take it out after the fact, before you did it on your pattern piece? But I mean, if you've already sort of made it, is there a way to go back in and take anything out?
If you've already cut out your sleeve piece, you can trim a little bit off the sleeve cap, and that's not going to bring the sides in at all, but it is going to bring the sleeve cap height down, which can help a little bit. It's not going to be, you're not going to be able to take out like a full inch of ease just bringing your sleeve cap down, because that's going to mess with the fit in some other areas. But you can shave off a little bit, and that'll help take a little bit of that ease out.
Sort of just make it not like puffy.
Yeah. Yep, that'll help in the puff.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, our next question here is from Nancy, and she says, is there an easy way to make binding?
Yes, it depends on what your definition of easy is. That's kind of subjective, but I think this method is easy. So the method called continuous bias binding, and you can type that into your search bar and get, tutorials all over the internet from quilters. But it's really easy. So you use a formula to determine a square to cut. So measure the edge that you need bound, and get the whole number of inches that you need bound. And I actually don't have the formula right on hand. You're taking the square root of something. Ashley is going to Google that for me while I move on. Google the formula for continuous bias binding. But the formula is going to give you a size of a square. And you're going to draw a line on the diagonal for your corner to corner on your square. And you're going to cut along the line. And then you're going to match up. So you're going to end up with two right triangles. And you're going to match up with right sides together, this edge of the triangle and this edge of the opposite triangle. So I'm going to cut mine and then show you what that looks like. And I also have this tutorial. I demo this in my intermediate sewing skills video, which is going to be up on nationalsewingcircle.com shortly, I believe. So you can see everything that's going on. So I've cut on the diagonal here, and I'm just going to move this down and align these straight edges. And we're going to sew that edge. So you get this cool looking weird thing. You're like, what? How is this going to turn into binding? We're going to align these edges, and you want to make sure that you have a triangle sticking out, so that we're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance to stitch this. So you can draw your 1/4 inch seam allowance on this and make sure that as you start the seam, so this is going to align right at your 1/4 inch. So your seam allowance is going to be right here. So you're going to have a little corner sticking up from there. So I'm going to turn around and sew this.
All right, and while she is sewing that, I did Google our formula, our equation for figuring out how much you will need to do your continuous bias binding. And so she had just a small square, but if you're making a quilt, or something larger, you have your height plus your width times 2, and then you're going to add 10 inches to that. And that 10 inches extra is going to be what you can use when you're bringing your continuous bias binding or your binding, whatever you're making together, and you need to join those ends. It's a lot easier to have 10 plus extra inches, so you're not coming around and only having maybe a 1/2 inch that overlaps when you're trying to finish off those edges. So having that extra plus 10 in our little formula here, that's what that is. So your height of the quilt plus the width of the quilt times 2, and then add 10 extra inches.
Okay. So then with this sewn, you get this cool parallelogram. And you're going to mark lines, parallel lines, along here according to the width of your binding. I'm going to throw in a couple of lines here.
What width are you using? Is this for a double fold?
I'm just doing 2 inches.
Yep.
Because that's the width of my ruler.
Perfect.
But that is a good width for a double fold bias binding. So I've marked parallel lines, and if the last line is not your full 2 inches, don't worry about that. That's some extra. And then we're going to take this and fold it, and we're going to align these edges. So our long bias edges, we're going to align those with right sides together, but we are not going to start, we're not going to match up the first line with the first line because that's going to give us a loop. So we need to offset by 1. So we're moving this over. And it's going to take a little bit of maneuvering to get this to align.
So you're aligning the lines that you drew, right? So you offset them by 1, but then you're making sure that the lines you drew line up perfectly one to the other.
Yes, at our 1/4 inch seam allowance.
Mm-hmm.
The lines align at the seam allowance. And once you make sure one is going to align, the others will kind of fall into place. Take it just a little bit at a time. It's going to kind of turn into this mess.
So like you said, it does depend on your definition of easy, but once you see, when you get to the final part where you actually get to cut it, and then you see how big, long strip of all the bias binding that you need, like you'll definitely see how this is easier than cutting this tiny bit and then sewing it to the next one, sewing it to the next one. So it is sort of a process to sort of see how it comes together. And it may seem kind of tedious to be lining everything up like this, but once you start cutting it apart and see how you just get one long continuous strip, it's definitely worth the time to do it.
Yes, and especially when you need actual bias binding, instead of trying to cut all these diagonal strips and line them up and piece them, you know, piece by piece, I think this is easier. So you can see I've got this kind of tube, and here's my offset. So I've got my offset line. And you can kind of see when I sew this seam over here, when I sew that and I start cutting along the lines that I drew, my binding lines, it's going to cut in kind of a spiral and give me a whole big length of bias binding. So I might as well go sew this and cut it so we can do the full reveal.
I was gonna say, you absolutely have to. There's no possible way that you can get this far and then not show us what it looks like at the end. That would just be kind of mean. So like she said, when she was pinning it, that might be the most complicated part, is pinning it. And definitely you're probably going to make a mistake the first time you do this. I know the first time that I tried to do this method, I did not offset when I was pinning. And so I essentially just made a bunch of rings that were sewn together, and I couldn't do anything with them. So don't be afraid to make a mistake with this method. I think everybody does it at least once, but then once you get it right the first time, then you'll sort of have a little bit of muscle memory and remember how things went together, what it should look like when you've got it pinned, so you know if you have it right before you even stitch it. And then, you know, if you use this method a lot, it'll just be kind of come second nature, and you'll remember how it goes together, and it'll be super easy to do. So we are anxiously awaiting the reveal as she finishes stitching.
And of course, you would press open all of your seam allowances first. You'll start.
So you're starting to cut where the offset was, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Trying to cut up so you can see. A little awkward.
So normally, I would say if you were doing this in your sewing room, you'd probably have this down on your mat and you'd be cutting, and it would be going a lot easier than, but you can see as it just spirals down, and you're gonna get this long piece of binding.
So it comes out in our bias. There we go.
Perfect. So, and if you use that formula, you'd have the exact length. So that gives you the strip, right? So now you have to actually press it or form it into your binding.
Right. You would have to still fold, whether if you were doing single fold or double fold, folding the edges into the center and then folding it over again.
Mm-hmm. And for an easy way to do that, and this one truly is easy, they make a little tool, and all you have to do is feed it in through one end and pull it and press it, and it's called a little binding making tool. I feel like Nikki's reaching for one right now, and that is truly easy.
These little guys.
Mm-hmm. So you just feed it in one side.
Yeah, feed it in the wide end, feed it in flat, and it's gonna kind of curl the edges in and come out folded, each long edge folded to meet in the center. And pull it out on your pressing board, pin one end to your ironing board, and press as you pull it out.
Perfect. All right, so the cutting might seem complicated, but it's really, once you get it down, pretty easy. All right, our next question here, this is from Flora, and she says, your videos are very informative and it helped me greatly. I would love to learn easy projects for gift giving. Do you have any suggestions as to where I should start? Any information she'd appreciate if you're willing to share.
Yes, well, thank you, Flora. I'm glad that these have helped you learn a little bit. So as for easy gifting projects, I'm sure Ashley will chime in with some National Sewing Circle videos, but I always point people to sewitallmag.com and sewitalltv.com. They have, Sew It All magazine was geared toward beginners, and they have a lot of, I think they should still have some free content up, free instructions for projects, and even some free templates and patterns. And sewnews.com, a lot of times they will have some free patterns and things. But if you have something specific in mind for gift giving, you can type that into your search bar. Scarf, like a scarf, infinity scarf project is a really good, easy project that's great for beginners, and it's great for gift giving. Everybody loves getting a beautiful, lightweight infinity scarf. That's was really trendy a couple years ago, and it still is. I still wear my infinity scarves all the time. And everybody needs and everybody loves, a little zippered pouch for cosmetics or whatever, organizing your purse. That's a really good gift giving project. Ashley, what have you got?
Well, so just to follow up on a couple that you've mentioned, we absolutely have a free article as well as a video on how to do an infinity scarf. So that pattern is available on our website. Also have a free video and pattern for how to make a small zippered pouch. So it's actually going on right now. It started several weeks ago, but it's the Oh So Fun Sewing Challenge. It's totally free. You can sign up on the website or on our Facebook page, Oh So Fun Sewing Challenge Facebook page, and get all of those free patterns. And there's a lot of other fun little gift ideas. We also have a couple articles on the site that actually sort of just compiled 5 or 10 easy projects from the site that are good for gift giving. But definitely anything, if you go to our website and go under, you know, projects and the accessories tab, that's sort of where you'll find projects like scarves and bags and just simple little things like that. But we definitely have tons and tons of videos. But like Nicki said, if you have something specific that you're looking for, even search for that on our site, and I'm sure we have a video for it. And if we don't, email us and then we will make a video for it. So we'll have it for the future. So we're definitely always looking for suggestions as well. Okay. All right, our next question here is from Patty. And she says that she's wanting to buy a new sewing machine that does finishing stitching for tops. What would you suggest?
Finishing stitching, like decorative stitches.
Well, in my mind, finishing to me means like serger finishing of edges. So that's what I think of.
Okay. Well, as far as I can answer as for both of them. So if you're looking for decorative stitches, a lot of even basic machines have a ton of decorative stitches built in. This is a Brothers CS6000i, one of their lower, less expensive models, and it has like 52 built-in stitches. So I'm never wanting for decorative stitches. But as far as finishing seam allowances, if you don't have a serger to finish your seam allowances, I don't have a serger. I always finish my seam allowances with my zigzag stitch, which all machines should have. And that's a really easy, quick and easy way to finish your seam allowances. And it doesn't look as pretty as a nice serger finish on the inside of your garment, but it does the job, and it'll keep your seam allowances from raveling and finish it up. And that's all I have ever needed, and I have sewn a lot of garments.
Absolutely. And like you said, most I don't know if there's even a machine that you can buy out there nowadays that doesn't offer a zigzag stitch of some kind. So you'd be able to do at least some kind of seam finishing with pretty much any machine.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep. All right, our next question here is from Marcia, and she wants to know if you have any suggestions for keeping facings from poking out, like those on an unlined jacket or a V-neck dress.
Yeah. Yep. So when you are sewing a facing around a neckline and you turn it toward the inside, give it a really good steam, a really good press, trying to roll that seam a little bit, favor that to the wrong side so the seam doesn't show right on the edge. But to keep that facing inside is sometimes a challenge, especially in lighter weight fabrics that facing sometimes wants to roll out. So what do? Pattern instructions, the pattern guide sheet will often tell you to understitch the facing. And what that means is to stitch the seam allowances of that seam to the facing. And that is just going to give a little bit more weight to the facing to help keep that on the inside. If you want, if it's still somehow coming out, or if you want a more, you want it to be more secure, you can always top stitch that seam, edge stitch right along the seam, having that the facing favored to the inside, just edge stitch 1/4 inch from the edge. That gives a nice clean look, and that will keep your facing stuck right there, stuck on the inside. I made a top a while ago that had a facing on the V neckline with a slit, and I ran a line of decorative stitches about a 1/2 inch from that neckline edge, and it gave it a little decoration, and it kept the facing where I wanted it to be. But if you do want that invisible look on your neckline, and if one line of understitching isn't doing it for you, you can even try a second line of understitching on those stitching those seam allowances to the facing. You could even try a slightly heavier weight thread to give it more weight to keep that rolled to the inside. So one of those options hopefully will keep that tucked in for you.
Well, and speaking of this shirt that you made, just because I have to talk about classes that you have done for us, Nikki, what did you make that shirt for?
Well, that is indeed the shirt that I made for my National Sewing Circle video. What was it called? The How to Make a Tunic shirt, a decorative stitch tunic shirt or something. So that is on the site. You can watch me make the shirt from start to finish.
Absolutely. And you do provide a pattern for that shirt as well, right, with that class?
Yes, yep, there's a pattern with the class.
See, perfect. So you can get the pattern and try it out and see how to finish the neckline all in one class. Perfect.
Yep.
All right, our next question here. What is the neatest way to finish a circular skirt, i.e. fabrics that are on the bias?
So finishing the hem of a circle skirt is something that I also talk about in the intermediate sewing course that will be on the website shortly. But I have actually one right here.
Of course you do.
Because I'm filming a video on how to sew with velvet. So I made a velvet circle skirt that's going to be on nationalsewingcircle.com probably in 6 to 8 months after I film it later this month. But this is a circle skirt. So the lower edge is the hem has a lot of drape and fold to it. So how do you finish that lower edge, turning that great circumference of the cut edge up into something that is a smaller circumference, and also working with something on the bias. So that circle skirt lower edge is going to be on the bias, and sometimes it can be a little tricky to keep that stabilized. But the easiest way I have found to hem that is to run a line of basting stitches about 1/4 inch in from the cut edge. And just the act of basting is going to kind of put some gathers in that lower edge right by the raw edge. And that's going to help ease that cut edge in up an inch or whatever your hem allowance is, up into that lesser circumference, an inch up the skirt. So you can see there's my line of basting stitches, and I didn't have to pull up on those at all, but if you have a full circle skirt, this is just a half. If you have a full circle skirt that has a lot of extra circumference at the cut edge, you may need to pull up on those basting threads to gather it in even more to ease that in. And then I use my hem gauge to kind of ease that in and give it a good press, making sure I've got, my inch hem allowance all around. And then on velvet, I hand stitched the hem, but if you are just doing something in cotton, you can go ahead and just top stitch that. Probably kind of close to the cut edge. So you get a nice line of top stitching around the lower edge of your hem. But there are other ways you can stitch if you want, a cleaner finish on that cut edge, since this doesn't, you could zigzag stitch your raw edge first, of course. This is a knit, so I did not do that. But you can finish your raw edge, or if you want a cleaner finish on that raw edge, you can stitch some, let me see if I have it, some ribbon or some lace, some thin ribbon or some lace. I do have it, haha. Here's another one. You can stitch some ribbon to the raw edge. So having your skirt right side up and your ribbon right side up. Stitch that thin ribbon, so about, so you've got your ribbon lapped about halfway over that raw edge, and then fold that toward the wrong side, just favoring the skirt toward the wrong side so you don't see the ribbon on the right side at all, and then just top stitch the opposite edge of that ribbon. So that will kind of help ease that that circumference and that bias in, and that gives a nice stable finish to your bias edges. And this is great for when you don't have a lot of hem allowance, because this would use probably a 1/4 inch, if that, of hem allowance to just turn that little ribbon under. So make sure it's a narrow ribbon so that you'll be able to ease it in around that curve, or a lace is good because lace has a lot of ease and give to it. So those are a couple of options, but hopefully that will help answer the question.
Absolutely.
My long rambling answer.
All right, our next question here is from Rai or Ree. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, but she says that she loves your blouse or dress, what you're wearing. What pattern did you use if you made it? And is it a knit or woven fabric?
Thank you. It is a blouse. It is a woven fabric. It's a lightweight, probably rayon, I'm not sure, but I did not make it. I got this from, I think, Ann Taylor. But thank you. I wear this all the time. It's one of my favorites. Nice and lightweight.
Okay, but so if you were trying to find something similar and you needed to search for that pattern, isn't that called like a cowl neck or?
Yes, this is the cowl neckline style, which I love. I have a ton of shirts with this. So yeah, if you want to search.
Absolutely. Yep, cowl. You can search for a cowl neckline, sleeveless top. I'm sure there's a pattern out there somewhere that can get you close to what she's wearing. All right, our next question here. How do you sharpen scissors and pinking shears?
Ooh, that is a good question. I know they sell sharpening tools, I believe. You can also take them in to certain places. I don't know if all like fabric stores or sewing machine retailers or places like that would do it. I would call ahead to see. But I know you can take your scissors and stuff into a professional to get them sharpened, or I believe there are at-home tools. I've never used one, so I don't know how I would describe how to use one. So I'm not sure.
I've only ever used one, and I believe it was one that my mom had several years ago, but it's just like it's a little thing that you put the scissor blades in and actually like act like you're cutting. And it's sort of, and you kind of cut and pull out, and it's supposed to sharpen. I mean, I don't actually know how effective they are because I've never, cut something and then sharpened it and then cut to test immediately after. But it definitely would work as a quick fix, but I would lean towards the taking it in to have it professionally done.
Right, especially for pinking shears. I'm not sure if a tool like that would work on pinking shears.
I think it would take the pink right off. I don't think it would work. So yeah, probably don't try the scissor sharpening on the pinking shears, but for regular scissors, it might work.
Yep.
All right, our next question here. I have noticed that a number of ready-to-wear knit t-shirts are cut off grain. Is this an error or deliberate to create a better drape?
That's a good question. I have noticed that too on some of my knit tops. The side seams will kind of go wonky, and I'll end up with one of my side seams more toward the front, and the other one kind of twists around to the back. I think I would have to guess that is just something that they have done to conserve fabric, to get as many shirts cut out of their fabric as they can. They just kind of lay the patterns, however, with not as much attention paid to the grain line as should be, as we home sewers do. So I think that's just a money saving thing for the manufacturer, unfortunately.
Absolutely, I agree with that one.
Yep.
All right, I just want to remind anyone out there that is maybe watching, if you have any questions that you want Nicki to answer, go ahead and type those into the comment section under the video, and we will continue to work our way through as many questions as we can. But our next one here, what is the best kind of paper to use when drafting your own pattern?
There are a lot of pattern papers, different types of pattern paper that you can use. I like this kind.
I love how you just have everything just within reach.
Well, my sewing room is small and everything is out right now because I'm working on the videos for National Sewing Circle. Everything is out. But this paper, if you can tell, it's just like a copy weight, paper, just kind of the weight that you would put in your printer, but it comes on a gigantic roll. The roll is like huge, many, many feet tall, and I got like 100 yards on the roll or something. But it's called craft paper, Kraft, and it comes in white and brown. I got the white variety, obviously easier to see your marks on. But it's easy to draw on, it's easy to cut on, it's easy to use my tracing roller and roll through to copy off patterns. I got mine on Amazon.com. Just ordered it. They had a bunch of different varieties of sizes and everything for me to choose from. I know a lot of people do use it's called Swedish tracing paper or something. There is the more tissue paper variety out there. So when you're looking for pattern drafting paper, keep that in mind. Make sure if you want the craft paper weight, that you're not getting the very tissuey paper weight. That's more like the commercial pattern paper. I like the thicker paper, thicker than the tissue paper, because it's just easier for me to throw around on my cutting mat and turn around and trace and everything. I'm not worried about it being delicate and tearing and everything. So that is my favored kind. They do make a variety. It was way more expensive, and that is why I did not get it. But if I had my way, I would have gotten the kind that has the grid on it. That's what they had when I went to college. In their sewing room, they had a huge roll of this pattern paper that it was blue markings on the back, and it was in a grid of, I think, 1 inch, but it was like a numbered grid, numbered one way. And it was so easy to work with and so helpful, but it was about the same weight as the craft paper. So I like that weight. And a grid would be useful, but just plain is also fine.
And I'm just going to throw this out there just because I never plan ahead enough to be able to order something on Amazon and then wait a couple days for it to get to me. Like when I need the paper, I kind of need the paper. So you can't get the white one, but you can get the brown craft paper actually at like a Lowe's or Home Depot over in like the painting department. It's meant for like laying down to protect your floors and stuff, but it's the same. It says craft paper and everything, but it's just the brown paper, and it comes on the big rolls. You can get them in, the 4 or 5 feet, or even just like a thin piece too. And then another one that when I do occasionally order something online, you can get exam table paper.
Right.
So like the rolls of stuff that, when you go to a doctor's office, and it's a little bit lighter weight though.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ever needed to like trace a pattern, you could see through that versus the craft paper. So
right. You could, lay that paper on top and just trace over instead of having to trace around and then draw it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be useful too. And I will also say, the brown craft paper may also be available at like post offices for packaging purposes, but you can use it for tracing patterns.
Absolutely.
And I will also say, in my younger years, when I was young and naive, I used to use newspapers to transfer my patterns onto and do my pattern alterations, which is not a good idea because it seemed like a great idea. Like, I have this paper, it's free, let's reuse it, recycle. But no, don't do that. A, it's hard to see your markings on the newspaper because it's got all that text and pictures on it. And B, newspaper gets really brittle with age, and not even a lot of age. Like 6 months later, I took a pattern out and it was like crumbling and tearing and crumbling in my hands. So that was a bad move. So learn from me.
I think it's funny for 2 reasons, because you look like you're 16, and the fact that you still got a newspaper. I don't even know what to say.
Well, I think it was probably like a grocery store catalog that, just gets sent to me.
All right. Some good coupons. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question here, if you only have a size 20 pattern and you need something like a size 17, can you go ahead and cut it as a 20 and ounces a little larger?
Say the last part again. Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Yeah. So if you, can you go ahead and cut it as a 20 and then just sew the seam allowances a little larger?
Yes. Well, it would be the grading on patterns is not uniform in all areas. So I think that would not entirely work, since the difference between a size 17 and a size 20 pattern in the waist area is going to be an inch or something, but in the arm's eye area it's going to be less. So if you just try and up the seam allowance a uniform amount throughout the whole pattern, it's going to throw the fit off. So if you want to go down a size, if you have the pattern size lines, I would say, but you want to preserve the size 20, but you want to cut it out of fabric as a size 17, I would trace the size 17 onto a separate sheet of pattern paper and use that, use the size 17 instead of just trying to shift around the seam allowances.
Would it maybe be easier to even just make the larger size and then once it's made, take in where necessary?
Yeah, yep, that could work too. If you don't have the different size lines, that would be better than trying to do the uniform seam allowances larger. So that way you could just take out where you needed to take out extra space. For sure.
Perfect. All right, next question here is from Amelia, and she says, thank you ladies for your wonderful chat. Could you please explain what shifting or changing the needle to the right or left means and how this is achieved?
Yes, so the needle position on your machine will, in most machines, be able to shift. So, the way you sew a zigzag stitch, the needle shifts left and right. So you can alter the needle position to bump over, say if you're sewing a zipper or something and you want the needle to move over closer to the teeth. You can use the buttons on your machine. It's going to be different for all machines, so you'd have to consult your machine manual. But I don't know that I can really demonstrate on mine, but I know I at least have my default needle position is it jumps to the stitch called 0, 0, and that's a center position. But the stitch 0, 1 is positioned a little bit to the left. So I a lot of times will, depending on the application, I will use that. But it's just the way the machine is made, that needle, it's able to, inside the mechanism, to move over and stitch here. And a lot of times you will be able to bump it over in increments, just bump, 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 depending on what you need. I actually don't think mine has that capability to bump in tiny increments. It's either centered or like 1/8 of an inch to the left. So consult your machine manual or type it into your search bar. A lot of times people will, if you don't have your machine manual, you can either find it online or get other people's info who have the same machine as you. But yes, bumping the needle position over can be definitely useful in a lot of applications.
Absolutely, and like you said, just consult your manual, because I also have a Brother machine, just a different model, and I do have the capability to move mine over. I have a little plus or minus button, and so once I've picked my stitch, I can go plus will move to the right, minus moves it to the left. So once I've actually selected a stitch, I can move it. So like you said, it could be totally different, machine to machine. So definitely look into that. All right, our next one is a long one here. So you ready?
Ready.
Okay, this is from Vicky, and she says that she has been asked to alter a bridesmaid's dress, and the bridesmaid is currently 4 months and showing a lot. The wedding is in 2 months, so she will be 6 months, and the dress they ordered has a waistline which she already cannot zip. The bodice has boning, but is also too large in the bust. She's thinking about converting this dress to an empire, but I've never tried that before, and was wondering if you could give her things to be aware of. She also wants to know how hard it is to cut down the boning.
That is a really good question. I've actually never sewn with boning before, so I'm not sure how hard it is to cut. I think it will also depend on the type of boning, because I believe they make boning in a plastic variety and a metal variety. So that will depend. But as far as converting it to an empire, that shouldn't be too hard, actually, to just cut it right below the bust. Just make sure that you you give her enough gathering, enough fabric that's, give her room to grow. So a lot of fabric in the, the material that's going to go under the bust, so that will flow over the growing baby. But I know Ashley actually made her wedding dress, so she may have some tips on this.
Well, I did add boning to my dress, and I did use the plastic kind, and it really is not that hard to cut down. I just cut it with a pair of scissors. I did not use my, nice sewing shears. I just have a pair of regular scissors, or honestly just my office scissors or something, and you can just cut right through that. So that's not very hard to cut down. All you need to do is, it has sort of the fabric covering over it, so you're gonna open up the fabric covering over it, so you can kind of pull that back, cut the plastic, and then cut the fabric about a ½ inch above it, so you can still sort of finish that edge. That way the boning doesn't sort of poke out the top or the bottom. You'll definitely want to stitch that back to kind of keep that secure there. So if you're cutting the top or the bottom, just make sure you've sewn it back so it stays in place where you want it to.
Right.
Perfect. All right. Hopefully that answers your question, and congratulations on the wedding and the baby.
Yeah.
All right. The next question here, it says, I have a simple problem, but it drives me crazy. Some brands of thread have a slit in the spool that holds the start of the thread. Every time I use that kind of thread, the thread stops at that slit and breaks while I'm sewing. How do I solve this problem?
Yes. I don't know that I have any. I know a lot of the older spools will have the slit in the side, and maybe it's a certain brand. I don't know. Maybe
Coats and Clark. Coats and Clark usually has the top.
Okay. Oh, this is Coats, but it's got.
Oh, they've upgraded. Oh, yeah, I don't know anymore.
Yep, it doesn't have the slit anymore. It's got the little round thing to tuck it into. But I do know a lot of the older spools that I have do have that little notch. And I think we may have talked about this before, or in a different setting, but so you can try and take like a knife and like cut that section off, like cut the little notch off. You can take some glue maybe to try and glue in to, smooth that over. Or I think Ashley may have suggested just turning the spool over if it doesn't have it on both sides. If it just had it on the top, you could turn it over so it would be on the bottom, so that in theory the thread as it unrolls would not catch on it.
Definitely. I think it catches more, and just with my experience with horizontal,
right,
when it's on a horizontal thread spool, because it can actually catch if your actual stopper isn't way bigger than your thread spool to keep it from doing that. I haven't had as much of a problem with it when it's vertical, but I definitely always put it on the bottom.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you have that option, go from horizontal to vertical. A lot of those you can flip up and down and change. So that would be an easy fix for that one. All right, our next question here, is there any way I can measure the length of a garment so I can hem it up without getting someone else to have to pin it for me?
Yes. So if you don't have a handy helper and you want to measure the hem, figure out how much you want to take something up, they make a tool that is a chalk hammer type thing. So it sits on a tripod, and it's got a little cache of chalk, and it's got a little squeezy thing to blow out chalk on the fabric. So you can stand there and squeeze the thing and blow chalk and turn and get your hem. Or you can just do a little trial and error. That's usually my method. Turn it up however much you think, pin it up, and then look in the mirror and see if you like it, and you know, trial and error that way. And then when you take it off, since as you're wearing it and like pinning it up and looking in the mirror, it's not going to be exactly even. So then when you take it off and put it on your pressing board, just make sure that the hem is an even amount all the way around.
Absolutely. And I'm going to steal the next question from you, but I do want to just answer it real quick. This is from Veronica, and she wants to know if we have video instructions using the Brother Quattro for both sewing and embroidery. And we do not have machine-specific videos on our site at all. That would be something you may have to look for videos on the Brothers website. They may have videos on their specific machines, but we have a bunch of tutorials, but nothing necessarily of certain brand or model machine specific. But all right, our next question here, it says, how do you work with heavily beaded fabric? How do you cut it, and can you actually sew it on your sewing machine?
Good question. That type of difficult fabric is tricky. You can sew it on your sewing machine. The trick is, or the problem people run into is, for something that is beaded, when you cut it or cut one of the threads, oftentimes a lot of the beads are going to be strung on the same thread. So before you sew it, you are going to want to take the beading out of the seam allowances, and you can run a line of fray check or fabric glue or something along your stitching line to kind of secure those threads before you cut the beading away from the seam allowances. And then make sure it's dry, of course, before you start moving it around and sewing it at all. That's going to be the main thing you need to do, because you're not going to be able to sew over all those beads. So you just want to get them away, get them out of the seam allowances and away from the seam line. I think Ashley may have a video actually on sewing tricky fabrics or sewing difficult fabrics that could offer some more tips as well.
Well, I don't know if I did a very heavily beaded one. There is a fabric with some beads, and then we have a heavily sequined fabric, which kind of has the same principles as removing it from the seam allowance. But yeah, that's pretty much the main part. Just because it's April and it's prom dress alteration season, and so I've been doing a lot of those. I'll say most commercial dresses, and when they do have a lot of beads sewn sort of together, like you were saying, so when you clip the thread, but it usually only goes about an inch. So if you clip it and you forget to do fray check, you're probably only going to lose about an inch of beads. So nothing, the whole thing won't come undone, but just about an inch. So don't freak out about that. But definitely the fray check is a good idea to stop any problems from happening. All right, our next question here. Are threads sold in big box stores lesser quality than those sold in fabric or quilt stores, even if they're the same brand?
No, I don't believe so. If it all comes from the same manufacturer, it's all going to be the same quality no matter where it is distributed and sold. So if it's, no matter if it's a Walmart or, you know, the mom and pop quilting shops, it's all coming from the same place.
Absolutely. All right, next, also a thread question. They say, I would probably use cotton thread or all-purpose thread when sewing cotton fabrics used for other materials.
Say the last part again, sorry. I think I know.
How do I know what thread to use for different materials?
Right. So in general, you want to match the thread fiber to the fiber of whatever it is that you're sewing. So an all-purpose thread is going to be good for most applications. All-purpose thread is a cotton wrapped polyester core thread, which is great. It has a little bit of stretch to it, but it also has, you know, a nice smooth finish. When you're sewing something that has stretch to it, I will say this before I get to your actual question. Let me take a long rambling answer. When you're sewing anything that has stretch, so a knit fabric or something that is woven with spandex or lycra, you want to use a all-purpose thread because polyester will have a little bit more give to it. 100% cotton thread does not have any give. So when you're sewing something that is 100% cotton, use, you know, if it's a woven, use 100% cotton thread. That way it's going to it'll behave the same and it'll wash the same, and everyone will be happy. But if you're using something, a fabric like you're sewing silk, a silk thread is going to be your best bet. You could get away with, you probably could get away with a thin all-purpose thread, but silk in the end is going to be your best bet. It's going to be thin and strong, and it's going to, like I said, behave the same as your fabric and wash the same as your fabric. I think that's the only really specialty type thread that I can think of. For most other things, it's a cotton thread or an all-purpose thread. So that's the only specialty thing that comes to mind.
Absolutely. And I have to admit, I use all-purpose thread for 99% of everything I sew. All right. All right, next question here, because you're talking about circle skirts. It says, what is a good way to figure out the size radius for the bottom of a maxi dress in order to not have to walk without taking teeny tiny steps?
Well, that'll depend if you're using knit fabric or a woven fabric. If you're using a knit, it's not as important because it'll stretch with your legs as you walk. I like to, you can also actually, it would be pretty easy to grab a skirt if you have a skirt, like a similar skirt from your closet, and measure that for a place to start measurement-wise. But if you're doing, so in talking about circle skirts, so you can do a full circle skirt, half circle skirt, or quarter circle skirt. And the quarter circle skirt is almost like just an A-line. And that is a good circumference ratio from your waist to the hemline. So if you're drawing, you know, your quarter circle skirt, it's just, you know, it's a quarter circle. You can draw your waistline here and your hemline here, and draw it, you know, as long as, I'm gonna just grab my, you know, I have this here. So this is a quarter circle.
Of course, just right there, pattern already drawn.
I know. So this is my tiny little pattern. I have my on the fold marking because it would end up being a half circle skirt. But if you ignore that, this would be just what a pattern would look like for a quarter circle skirt. So this would be your center back seam. And, you know, once you get your waist radius drawn in, then you can measure down from the corner however long you want it along both ends, and then draw yourself a curve in there using your French curve, or just measure from the corner in several spots that measurement that you're using and connect the dots. And that's a good hem radius that'll give you room for walking and a little bit of drape and flow. So it'll give you a silhouette that's similar to an A-line.
I like how you answer it with like a technical way, because I would have said take a big measuring a flexible ruler and make a big circle and then like stand in the middle of it, take a step and see if it works to walk. Like that's how my mind works. So that's how I would have figured it out. So I'm glad you were answering one.
I mean, your way is probably the easier way. Or like a string too, like tie a string in a circle and put it around your ankles and walk. and see if that works for you. So that's, yeah, that would be the easy way. Of course, I go into something long and rambling.
Here and I just say, put a string on the floor. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for technically answering all of our questions in a technical way and showing us how to do them all the correct way and enlightening everybody. So thank you once again for answering all of our questions this month.
My pleasure.
And I hope everyone tunes in again, and we will have another live event next month with even more sewing questions, sewing tips, and wonderful insight from Nicki, as always. Hope everyone has